This is WZR broadcasting on a prayer and fumes. If you're out there, if a whisper of this signal can still reach you through the dust and the silence, then you're hearing Arthur Vance. Used to be the guy who told you about the 5-car pileup on the I-95, or if your flight to Orlando was delayed. Now I just talk into the dark. Hope someone's listening. Hope I'm not just talking to the ghosts in these abandoned studios, or the rats scrabbling in the walls. A long, ragged breath, a dry swallow. I stopped marking the days. The concept of day and night feels alien now, a relic from another time. But I remember that day, clear as the shattered glass of the sky over this city. It was a Tuesday, October, I think, crisp, almost sharp autumn air, the kind that promised a clear day, a good day for a drive, maybe. My coffee was still steaming in the cup holder as I steered my old sedan through the morning rush. 5:05 a.m. on the dot, if memory serves. I was listening to, God, it seems so trivial now, some pop song, the kind that burrows into your brain and stays there. Sarah had packed my lunch, a turkey and Swiss, and Lily had left a crumpled drawing of a rainbow on the dashboard. Just a normal Tuesday. The first sign wasn't a roar, not a bomb, not even a shout. It was a flicker. My car radio, the one that usually spat out crystal clear signals, stuttered. A momentary silence, then a crackle. I thought nothing of it. Old car, probably a loose antenna. But then, as I approached the intersection of Elm and 4th, the traffic lights went out. Not just my lane, but the entire intersection. Black, dead. And it wasn't just there. I looked down the street, and all the signals, as far as I could see, were dark. Like someone had flipped a giant, silent switch. People hit their brakes. Horns blared, then collectively, almost symphonically, died down. A strange, confused quiet descended. People started rolling down their windows, craning their necks, looking at each other with furrowed brows. Then the real chilling part began. The street lights, even in the morning glow, had been on, a dull orange against the rising sun. They winked out, and the massive digital billboard advertising a new movie, usually a dazzling display of moving images, went blank. That's when a ripple of unease, like a cold draft, went through the street. This wasn't a localized power cut. This felt deliberate. I managed to navigate through the suddenly chaotic intersection. Without the lights, without the hum of the city, everything felt muted, dead. I pulled into the station parking lot, the asphalt strangely empty. Usually at this hour, it was a hive of activity. My producer, Mark, was standing by the entrance, staring at his phone, his face pale. "Arthur," he said, his voice flat, "my phone's dead, no signal. The internet's crawling, nothing, and the backup generator just kicked on. Mains power's out across the whole district." Across the whole district became across the whole metropolitan area within the hour. Then, the fragmented reports started trickling in. Not through official channels, because those were already sputtering. News feeds were frozen, government websites unresponsive. It was through the old-fashioned means, frantic phone calls from ham radio operators, relayed messages from other struggling stations, word of mouth. Global markets crashing, financial systems unresponsive. Major ports shut down. They were calling them unprecedented technical difficulties. The language of denial, a thin veil over the terrifying truth. We here at WZR tried to broadcast it, to make sense of it, but even our lines to official sources were just static. The scale of it was unfathomable. It wasn't an EMP, no sudden burst that fried everything. This was more surgical, more insidious. Imagine a vast, interconnected nervous system, suddenly, deliberately, being severed, nerve by nerve. The report spoke of sophisticated cyber intrusions, not simple hacking, but deep, coordinated attacks that exploited every vulnerability. Automated shipping ports, the arteries of global trade, suddenly locked up, no new containers moving in or out. Railway switching systems, complex networks that direct trains across the continent, went dark. Air traffic control, that intricate ballet of flight paths, simply ceased. Planes still in the air were suddenly flying blind, without guidance. And then the fuel began to run out. The pumps at the gas stations stopped humming. The big trucks that brought in our food, our medicine, our very way of life, they sputtered to a halt, stranded on silent highways. The first few hours were confusion. The next few were denial. People still thought it would come back on. Just a glitch, they'd say. The government will fix it. But the fix never came, and the dread began to bloom, cold and sharp. It wasn't the immediate, visceral fear of a bomb dropping. It was the slower, more agonizing realization that the carefully constructed framework of our lives was dissolving, piece by excruciating piece. The city, which had always throbbed with a ceaseless energy, began to fall silent. The distant hum of machinery, the constant background noise of human endeavor, it all faded, leaving behind an eerie, hollow quiet. The sound of our own breathing became shockingly loud. My personal conflict, the one that still gnaws at me even now, was Sarah and Lily, my wife and daughter. They were a few hundred miles north, in a small cabin near Baxter State Park in Maine, visiting Sarah's older sister Eleanor. They were supposed to be back that evening. We'd planned pizza night. I tried calling. My cell was dead. The station's landlines were out. Every crackle on the emergency band, every desperate report of crumbling infrastructure sent a fresh jolt of terror through me. Was Maine safer? Remote, yes, but also isolated. Cut off. The highways even then were becoming choked with abandoned cars, people bailing out, walking, trying to get somewhere. My instinct screamed to go to find them. But logic, the broadcaster's logic, said I was more useful here, trying to get information, trying to be a voice. The government, or what little we heard from it, tried to impose curfews, tried to reassure, but the words were meaningless. How do you impose order when the means of communication are gone? When the police force, already stretched thin, started to simply vanish? Not deserting, not in a malicious way, just going home, trying to find their families. Who could blame them? The military, which we always assumed would be the great protector, was already engaged elsewhere. The snippets we picked up from desperate military frequencies were of forward deployments, strategic defense, containment. They weren't coming to secure our neighborhoods. They were fighting their own silent, unseen war. The grocery stores were the first visual manifestation of the panic. Within a day, shelves were stripped bare. Not just essentials, but anything that could be eaten. I saw a woman well-dressed, arguing with a young man over a single can of diced tomatoes. Not screaming, just a low guttural growl of desperation. That's when the eerie truly set in. The polite masks of society slipped, the vacant stares of people as they walked past, their eyes glazed over with dawning horror, a realization of something fundamentally broken. The city's pulse was gone. Only a desperate, primal beat remained. One of the last things I heard before that particular frequency went dead was a fragment from a fellow broadcaster, a woman from a station across the country. Her voice was thin, reedy with fear. She was talking about coordinated attacks on critical infrastructure nodes. Then she said, "It's not EMP. They're targeting the very lifeblood, the data centers, the main fiber optic junctions, not just the internet, but the deep sea cables, the satellite ground stations. They're blindfolding the world." And then silence. Just a flat line. Each station going dark felt like a friend dying, a severing of another thread to the world that was... I remember that first night vividly. The air was cold, maybe 40 degrees Fahrenheit. Without the city lights, the sky was a velvet cloak, speckled with a million points of light I hadn't seen since I was a kid. The Milky Way, a shimmering band across the heavens, utterly indifferent to the human tragedy unfolding beneath it. It was breathtakingly beautiful and utterly, crushingly lonely, a silent, cosmic witness to humanity's self-immolation. And that's when the true dread sank its teeth in. Not just the fear of dying, but the fear of surviving. Surviving into a world utterly transformed, a world stripped bare of everything we had known, everything we had built. A world where the greatest superpower was no longer a nation, but the ruthless, indifferent hand of entropy. The quiet was the loudest thing. The hum of traffic, the distant drone of planes, the constant murmur of human activity, all gone, replaced by the sigh of the wind through empty streets, the rustle of leaves that seemed too loud, and the unsettling silence of a world holding its breath. It felt like the planet itself was listening, waiting for us to make our next fatal move. And we did. Oh, we certainly did. A brief stretch of static before Arthur Vance's voice returns, a little more strained. This is WZR, a flicker in the dark. Arthur Vance, and I'm still here, still broadcasting, still hoping. WZR, still on the air, Arthur Vance. If you're out there, wherever you are, please know you're not alone in this silence. The silence has become the loudest sound, hasn't it? It's been weeks now. I don't keep a strict count. Time itself has warped, stretched thin in some moments, racing by in others. But I remember the immediate aftermath of Operation Crucible. It wasn't the swift, clean obliteration the movies showed. No blinding mushroom clouds over every city. No immediate, merciful end. It was far more insidious, a slow, creeping decay. The gnawing rot of civilization, beginning at the edges and working its way inward. For those first few days, there was a desperate clinging to hope. People would say, "It'll be back on by morning," or "the military will have this sorted by the weekend." We believed in the resilience of our systems, the invincibility of our infrastructure. That belief shattered quickly, brutally. The surgical strikes, as they were so clinically called, proved to be far more damaging than any architect, any engineer could have conceived. They targeted not just military assets, though those were certainly hit, but the very sinews of modern society. Logistics hubs, the sprawling nerve centers of our distribution networks. Major data centers, the digital brains that ran everything from finance to traffic management. Oil refineries, the lifeblood of transport. Critical food distribution networks. The goal, it became terrifyingly clear, wasn't just to cripple an enemy's ability to fight a war in a conventional sense. It was to unravel them from within, to make their home front uninhabitable, unsustainable, and it worked. Oh, it worked with a chilling, terrifying efficiency that still makes my stomach clench. The food scarcity. That hit first, and it hit hardest. We live in a nation of unimaginable bounty, don't we? Supermarkets overflowing, shelves stacked high with produce from 1,000 miles away, meat flown in from across the globe. We never thought about where it came from or how. That just-in-time supply chain, the one that kept everything fresh and abundant, it was exposed as a brutal, fragile lie. Without constant trucking, without automated inventory tracking, without the power to run refrigeration units, those vast, humming labyrinths of chillers and freezers, the supermarkets became mausoleums of spoilage within a week. The air inside them, once cool and clean, grew thick with the cloying smell of rotting fruit and putrid meat. The plastic wrappers, meant to preserve, now only sealed in the stench of decay. I saw it. I went out just once to try and forage for anything. My old neighborhood store, the one with the cheerful deli counter, was a wreck. People had broken in not for electronics, not for cash, but for a bag of rice, a jar of peanut butter, a can of lukewarm soda. The veneer of civility, so thin to begin with, didn't just wear thin, it peeled away entirely like sunburnt skin. I witnessed a quiet, desperate struggle over a dusty box of pasta. Two men, usually mild-mannered, their faces contorted in a silent snarl, tugging at the box until it ripped, spilling dry spaghetti onto the filthy floor. It was Darwinism, raw and ugly, played out on the familiar, now desolate streets. The strong preyed on the weak, the desperate stole from the less desperate. And if you had nothing, you simply faded. Water. We never gave it a second thought, did we? Just turned the tap, and it was there. Clear, cold, potable. But the municipal pumps, they were reliant on power, on massive electric motors and control systems. They seized up. The miles of pipes, under constant pressure, began to burst in places where repairs couldn't be made. Without the flow, stagnant water became a breeding ground. I started collecting water from the roof of the station, running it through a crude, makeshift filter of charcoal and sand. It tasted metallic, vaguely like earth, but it was wet. It was survival. Disease. That old, relentless enemy began its relentless march. Without sanitation, without clean water, without medical supplies, the antibiotics, the pain relievers, the simplest gauze bandages, the smallest cut could fester, become infected, and lead to agonizing death. I saw makeshift signs tacked to utility poles, hand-scrawled messages fading in the wind. Need insulin urgently. Anyone have antibiotics for child? Pleas that went unanswered. The hospitals, once bustling beacons of healing, were quickly overwhelmed. Doctors and nurses, without power, without staff, without medications, became powerless. The sight of a coughing child, a feverish adult, filled you with a deeper dread than the sound of distant gunfire. The silence of the cities was profound. Before there was hum, the distant rumble of traffic, the buzz of street lights, the murmur of millions of lives. Now that was gone, broken only by the wind whistling through shattered windows, the eerie creak of an old building settling, or the occasional unsettling sound of distant gunfire. Not the sharp, quick crack of a hunter's rifle, but the dull thud of a shotgun, or the rapid, unceremonious chatter of automatic weapons. These aren't soldiers fighting a conventional war. These were desperate people fighting for scraps, for territory, for their very existence. Vigilante groups formed, some benevolent in their initial intent, offering protection and sharing resources. But many, many more became terrifyingly brutal. They claimed blocks, entire streets, even whole neighborhoods. Their rules were swift, their justice often summary, dispensed with the barrel of a gun. You learned to avoid certain areas, learned to read the crude territorial markings painted on walls. I ventured out from the station only when absolutely necessary, usually for water or what meager supplies I could forage from abandoned buildings. The air was different. Not just cleaner without the exhaust fumes, but heavier, laden with the smell of wood smoke, people burning whatever they could find for warmth, and something else, something I can only describe as the scent of decay, a slow, systemic death. The buildings, once vibrant with light and life, now stood as hollowed-out husks, windows broken, doors ajar like gaping mouths screaming into the void. It was an eerie, suffocating landscape of ruin. My own personal struggle, the one that never lets up, intensified. This radio, this fragile lifeline, also became my tormentor. Every time I sent out a signal, every time I spoke, I imagined Sarah and Lily somewhere out there, listening or not listening. Were they safe in that remote cabin in Maine? Had they made it there, or were they caught in the chaos on the roads? Was their isolation a blessing, or had it become a trap, cutting them off from any help? The not knowing was a constant, dull throb behind my eyes, a ceaseless pressure behind my temples. I'd replay our last conversation, a mundane exchange about what to have for dinner, searching for some hidden meaning, some forgotten warning. There was none, just ordinary life, swallowed whole by the unseen maw of Operation Crucible. I encountered other survivors, not many, and never for long. They were like ghosts, really, flitting through the ruined urban landscape. Each encounter was a fleeting, terrifying gamble. One woman, I remember her clearly. Her name was Anya. I saw her sifting through the rubble of a collapsed hardware store. Her face was gaunt, etched with 1,000 years of sorrow, her eyes vacant. She had a small, tattered backpack clutched to her chest. She didn't speak, not a single word, just stared at me with eyes that held the universe of despair. I offered her some canned fruit I'd found earlier. She took it without a sound, just a slight, almost imperceptible nod, and vanished into the shadows of a nearby alley. Her silence spoke volumes about the state of humanity. We were all broken, all just trying to keep the shattered pieces from scattering completely. The paranoia was a constant, suffocating companion. Every shadow seemed to hold a threat, every distant sound a potential danger. You learned to distinguish between the rustle of wind through debris and the subtle shuffle of footsteps on broken glass. You learned to read the crude graffiti on the walls, warnings, claims of territory, desperate messages. "Don't trust anyone," scrawled in faded paint, was a common refrain. And it was true. Kindness became suspect, generosity a potential trap. The few alliances that did form were brittle, based on fleeting necessity, not trust. We had turned on each other with a speed that still chills me to the bone, a grim testament to the thinness of our collective civility. From my perch here at the radio station, I witnessed the decay of society in slow motion. Garbage piled up in the streets, a grotesque, festering testament to the collapse of services. The sanitation crews, the waste management systems, all gone. Rats, emboldened and numerous, became the new dominant species. They scuttled through the debris, a silent, fearless army of scavengers, their eyes glinting in the dim light. The air itself seemed to thicken with the residue of human failure, a miasma of rot and despair. And the season was turning. The air grew colder, promising the true horrors of winter. A season without heat, without shelter, without enough food. The technical explanation for the lasting effects, for why it didn't just turn back on, is simple, yet profoundly devastating. Modern infrastructure isn't designed to run on autopilot indefinitely. Power grids require constant maintenance, fuel delivery to power plants, and specialized engineers to monitor and repair them. Water treatment plants need a steady supply of chemicals, intricate pressure regulation, and skilled technicians for daily operation. Communication networks demand continuous power to servers, regular fiber optic repairs, and constant monitoring. When those services ceased, the systems didn't just turn off neatly, they began to degrade. Components failed from lack of lubrication, wires frayed, pipes burst from fluctuating pressures, circuits overloaded without proper regulation. It wasn't a static ruin. It was an ongoing process of entropy, unwinding everything we'd built, accelerating with each day. A gradual, mechanical death, far more terrifying than any sudden explosion. The cause, as far as I could piece together from the dying whispers on distant military frequencies, was a series of catastrophic miscalculations. A proxy conflict, simmering for years, escalating out of control. A cyber attack intended as a warning shot, a flexing of digital muscle spiraled into a full-scale assault when a counterattack equally ill-conceived damaged a critical system on the other side. Each side believing the other had crossed an unforgivable line, each responding with disproportionate force, until the limited engagement became a global cataclysm of interconnected failures. No one won, everyone lost. The ultimate, bitter irony. The world wasn't destroyed by a single bomb, but by 1,000 tiny escalating aggressions, justified as a defensive measure, each a step closer to the precipice. It was the collective weight of human hubris, pressing down until the very foundation cracked and shattered. I often wonder about the specific stories, the unseen tragedies playing out beyond my fractured view. The families huddled in basements, listening to the world burn outside their flimsy walls. The desperate journeys of those trying to reach loved ones, only to find impassable roads and landscapes that swallowed them whole. The quiet heroism of those rare souls who shared what little they had, offering a fleeting glimpse of humanity, and the sickening cruelty of those who took everything, who found power in the suffering of others. This broadcast, this solitary voice in the dark, is, in a way, my attempt to document it, to bear witness, to tell the tales I cannot see but can feel reverberating through the desolate frequencies, the echoes of a world that once was. Static hisses again, a mournful, echoing sound, before Arthur Vance's voice returns, barely a whisper now, as if speaking through a great distance. This is WZR, still here, still speaking into the dark, waiting for an answer, waiting for a sign that someone somewhere is still listening, or perhaps just waiting for the silence to finally claim me too. Over and out. This is WZR, a dying ember in the vast, encroaching night. Arthur Vance, still here, still talking. The days blur, the weeks have melted into a single, interminable season. And that season, it's winter. A winter unlike any I've ever known. Not just the cold, but a cold that carries the weight of a world broken. A world that has simply stopped caring. The temperature outside, I estimate, often drops to a bitter 10 degrees Fahrenheit, sometimes lower. Even inside these thick concrete walls, it can be a chilling 30 or 40 degrees Fahrenheit, a constant, gnawing damp that sinks into your bones. The immediate aftermath of the initial collapse, the frantic scramble, has long since given way to something far more profound, far more draining. A dull, persistent ache that never truly recedes. A deep-seated weariness that settles into your very core, making every movement, every thought, an effort. Survival isn't about grand escapes anymore. It's about methodical, grueling existence. My days here at the station have fallen into a grim rhythm. Scavenging for anything edible, the canned goods are dwindling, the dried staples almost gone. Maintaining the temperamental diesel generator, that beast that gulps fuel like it's going out of style, which it is. And most importantly, broadcasting. This microphone, this cold, unforgiving metal object, it's become my anchor, my only conversation, my confessional. It's a strange, unsettling intimacy, speaking to silence, imagining the faces of those few scattered listeners out there. Or perhaps imagining no one at all. Just sending my voice out into the void, a desperate act of defiance against utter oblivion. The city, once a vibrant, breathing organism, is now a skeletal shell, picked clean by nature and desperation. The urban arteries, the roads, are choked with skeletal remains of abandoned cars, frozen solid, their tires flat, their interiors coated in a fine layer of dust and ice. Trees, defiant and opportunistic, push through cracks in the asphalt, their roots splitting concrete sidewalks, tearing through the foundations of abandoned storefronts. Vines, thick as my arm, snake up the sides of skyscrapers, claiming the glass and steel for their own, a green shroud over a dead world. It's an eerie, almost sacred transformation. A testament to nature's indifference, its boundless capacity to heal the scars we inflict. Deer, gaunt and wary, pick at dead grass in what were once manicured lawns. Coyotes, bolder and hungrier, slink through alleys, their eyes glinting in the pale moonlight. Even the rats, a constant silent presence, seem to move with a new, unsettling confidence. They are the new dominant species, these creatures, reclaiming a landscape humanity so carelessly abandoned, and the pervasive silence. It's only broken by the wind whistling through shattered windows, a ghostly lament, or the unnerving creak of an old building settling, a mournful sigh of decay. Sometimes, if I strain my ears, I can almost hear the ghost of the city's former hum, a phantom limb of sound, a memory that refuses to die. But the hardest part, the true torment that chips away at the edges of my sanity, is the solitude. The mind, you see, is a social organ. It craves connection. It aches for validation. It needs the shared burden of existence, the echo of another human voice, another human touch. Without it, the internal dialogue can become a relentless echo chamber, amplifying every fear, every doubt, every crushing wave of loneliness. I catch myself talking to myself, to the shadows that dance in the generator's flickering light. I talk to the dusty equipment, the inert consoles, and then I talk to you, whoever you are. This broadcast, this singular flickering pulse on the airwaves is my sanity, my last thin thread of purpose in a world where purpose has ceased to exist for most. It's my way of not just surviving, but continuing to be Arthur Vance, not just another nameless frozen casualty. I've seen how people adapted, or more accurately, how they failed to. Some, the rare few, coalesced into small, desperate communities, huddled together in fortified buildings, pooling their meager resources, trying to protect themselves against the elements and against each other. Their survival was a delicate balance, a constant vigilance against internal strife, a whispered argument that could turn deadly, and external threats, the marauding gangs who saw them as easy targets. But most did not adapt. Most simply faded, one by one. The death toll from the cold alone must be astronomical. I've seen them. Frozen, twisted forms, often huddled against a wall, their faces locked in a silent scream of agony. They became part of the landscape, like fallen statues to a forgotten god, their silent presence a constant, chilling reminder of the thousands, millions who simply succumbed to the indifferent elements. And then there was disease. It moved with a horrifying speed and efficiency, far more deadly than any bullet. Without sanitation, without clean water, without working sewers, without medical supplies, the antibiotics, the pain relievers, the simplest gauze bandages, the smallest cut could fester, become infected, and lead to agonizing death. Dysentery, influenza, pneumonia, cholera, old enemies, thought long vanquished, returned with a vengeance, sweeping through the population like an invisible fire. I'd hear the desperate, racking coughs from blocks away, echoing through the empty streets, see the pale, feverish faces in the fleeting moments I ventured out. There was nothing to be done. No medicine, no comfort, just the cold, hard reality of suffering and death. The silent epidemics were far more devastating than any bomb could have been, silently pruning humanity from the inside out. My personal conflicts haven't resolved. Lily, Sarah, every sunrise is a fresh ache behind my eyes. Every sunset brings a fresh wave of quiet desperation. Did they make it to Maine? Are they safe, warm, fed? Or are they just another statistic in this silent, global reckoning? I replay memories, Lily's bright, innocent laugh, Sarah's calm, reassuring hand in mine, and they're both comfort and torment. These memories are all I have left of them, flickering images in the dark. This radio station, this constant voice, is my last act of defiance against the crushing weight of the unknown. It's my way of keeping their memory alive, of believing that somewhere, somehow, they might hear my voice and know I'm still fighting, still hoping, that I haven't given up on them, on us. The thought of them out there suffering, or worse, it's a constant dull throb behind my eyes, a ceaseless pressure behind my temples. The psychological decay is perhaps the most insidious enemy. Without companionship, without a future to plan for, without the simple comforts of a past life, the mind begins to unravel. I catch myself having full conversations with myself, arguing points aloud, laughing at nothing. Sometimes I see things in the shadows, a fleeting movement, a shape that isn't there. Hallucinations born of hunger, exhaustion, and profound loneliness. The air itself seems thick with a pervasive apathy. Many survivors simply curled up and waited to die. Their eyes were vacant, their spirit broken. Hope, that fragile thing, often died first. It's a chilling prospect, knowing that your own mind, the last bastion of self, can turn against you. I heard a story, a truly chilling one, from a faint, dying broadcast I picked up for only a few minutes. It was another radio operator, somewhere far to the west, his voice thin and cracking. He spoke of a family, holed up in a suburban home, trying to survive the winter. They ran out of food, and then he said they ran out of firewood. He described how they started burning their furniture, then their books, then the very floorboards of their home, piece by agonizing piece, just to keep a flicker of warmth. And eventually the signal just ended. Did they freeze? Did the roof collapse? The fate of 1,000 tiny, desperate struggles unheard, unrecorded. Another time, on one of my increasingly dangerous foraging trips, I stumbled upon a small group, maybe 5 or 6 people, huddled around a pathetic fire in the remains of a bus stop shelter. Their faces were gaunt, their clothes in rags. As I approached, one man, his eyes wide and unblinking, started to moan. A low, continuous sound, without words, without discernible pain. Just a sound of pure, unadulterated madness. His companions didn't react, just stared into the flames, utterly devoid of emotion. They were physically alive, but their spirits, their very humanity, had been stripped away. It was a stark reminder of the thin line between survival and becoming something else entirely. The cold is a constant adversary. The need for fuel for the generator is a constant anxiety. The hunt for food is a constant exhaustion. But more than any physical hardship, it's the erosion of hope, the crushing weight of isolation that truly tests you. You see the madness in people's eyes, the way they hoard what little they have, turning on even their closest neighbors for a handful of canned beans. The old rules are gone, the social contract shredded. What's left is raw, primal survival, and a cold, unforgiving world. But as long as this microphone works, as long as I have a voice, I will speak. I will bear witness. I will fight against the encroaching silence that threatens to swallow all of us. The static returns thick and oppressive before Arthur Vance's voice pushes through one last time, a strained whisper. This is Arthur Vance from WZR, still here, still speaking into the dark, hoping, always hoping, over and out. WZR Arthur Vance, still broadcasting from the ruins. If you're out there, if this signal can still pierce the pervasive silence, know that another season has turned. The brutal grip of that first winter has mercifully loosened its hold. The snow's melted, revealing more ruin, certainly. But also revealing something else, something unsettlingly beautiful, terrifying in its indifference. Life. Persistent, tenacious life, reclaiming what we abandoned with a relentless, quiet hunger. The city, this concrete jungle I once navigated blindfolded, is now being swallowed whole by the green. It's no longer the occasional weed pushing through a crack. Now trees, defiant and vigorous, sprout from broken sidewalks, their roots splitting concrete, tearing through the very foundations of abandoned storefronts. Vines, thick as my forearm, snake up the sides of skyscrapers, claiming the glass and steel for their own. A verdant, suffocating shroud over a dead world. Parks that were once manicured oases are now wild, untamed forests, their pathways choked with thorny bushes and volunteer saplings. It's an eerie, almost sacred transformation. A testament to nature's indifference, its boundless capacity to heal the scars we inflict, even as it mocks our hubris. Deer, gaunt and wary, graze openly on what used to be manicured lawns, their hooves now crushing overgrown weeds. Coyotes, once confined to the outskirts, now stalk the empty avenues, their howls echoing off the vacant buildings at dusk. a sound that sends shivers down my spine. I even saw a black bear, just last week, rummaging through the overturned bins of a forgotten diner near the old theater district, its massive form moving with an unsettling grace amidst the debris. They are the new inhabitants, the true inheritors of this quiet, desolate kingdom. But this reclaiming by nature isn't always benign. The collapse wasn't just about things stopping, it was about things breaking down. Without maintenance, without regulation, the silent, insidious environmental consequences of our industrial past began to seep into the new landscape. I've seen streams that run with an unnatural sheen, a rainbow slick of oil from a ruptured underground storage tank at what used to be a sprawling industrial park. No one is left to repair it. The chemicals, the pollutants, they just leach into the ground, into the water table, an invisible poison in the Earth's veins. While free of car exhaust, sometimes carries a faint, acrid chemical tang, especially after a heavy rain, likely from an unmaintained factory or a neglected waste site. The very ground we walk on, the precious water we desperately try to purify for drinking, carries the unseen scars of our former selves. It's a different kind of threat, one you can't see coming, but that slowly poisons you from the inside out. A subtle, creeping dread beneath the often beautiful return of nature. Amidst this profound decay, humanity persists, in scattered, desperate pockets. I've observed them from a distance, through binoculars from the higher floors of the station, or heard their faint, whispered transmissions on a jury-rigged shortwave set. Small, self-sufficient communities are beginning to form, often centered around defensible locations. An old school with thick brick walls, a repurposed warehouse, even a fortified church. Or crucially, around reliable water sources, a natural spring that feeds a small creek, a well that could be reopened, a clear section of a river untouched by the visible pollution. They are fragile, these new collectives, inward-looking, deeply suspicious of outsiders. Their very existence is a constant negotiation, a battle against internal strife, a whispered argument that can quickly turn deadly over dwindling resources, and against the ever-present threat of those who would take what little they have by force. New threats, you see, have replaced the old. The war itself, the grand global conflict that tore the world apart, seems to have burned itself out. The distant echoes of conventional battles are gone. No more faint booms, no more distant rumble of artillery. But in their place, 1,000 smaller, more brutal conflicts have emerged. Organized scavenging gangs, hardened survivors who prey on the desperate, roam the outskirts, armed and dangerous, a predatory undercurrent in the quiet. Desperate refugees starving and dispossessed from more ravaged areas sometimes stumble into the city, driven by rumors of food or safety, only to find more ruin, and sometimes violence. And the environmental dangers, the contaminated water, the silent chemicals, those are the most insidious, working their slow, unseen havoc, a constant companion to survival. My own perspective has shifted profoundly. From being merely a chronicler of disaster, I now find myself observing a new, harsh equilibrium. The world isn't waiting to be fixed, it's simply being. Its wounds are deep, its changes perhaps permanent. My broadcasts have changed too. They are less about the immediate catastrophe and more about documenting this strange, post-apocalyptic landscape. I describe the way the sunlight filters through the broken windows of abandoned office buildings, illuminating dust motes dancing in the silent air. The sound of birdsong, once drowned out by city noise, now fills the void, a testament to enduring life, a heartbreaking symphony of survival. This grim beauty is almost unbearable at times, a constant reminder of what we lost for what we have. The decking thought of leaving this station, of abandoning this microphone and going to find Sarah and Lily, it's a constant battle inside my skull. a push and pull that never ceases. This broadcast, this act of speaking into the dark, has become my purpose, my reason for existing. It's the last thread connecting me to the world that was, to who I was. But every sunrise, every quiet moment, Lily's face flashes in my mind. Her bright eyes, her messy pigtails, Sarah's calm smile, the warmth of her hand in mine. Are they still out there? Is my staying here a betrayal, or is it a last desperate hope that they might somehow miraculously hear my voice and know I'm still fighting, still hoping? I walk to the edge of the city, look out at the choked highways, the endless miles of deserted land between me and them. The logistics are impossible, the dangers insurmountable. Yet the longing never truly fades. It's a constant dull ache, like a phantom limb. There was a day, a few weeks ago, when I saw it. A glint on the horizon, far to the south. A faint, almost imperceptible column of dust rising against the distant tree line. Through my binoculars, I could just make out the silhouette of what looked like a military convoy, battered, rusting, moving slowly, deliberately, not like an invading force, but like a desperate retreat, or perhaps a last isolated patrol, maintaining a futile semblance of order. It confirmed what I already suspected. The global powers, the great nations, had effectively ceased to exist as cohesive forces. Whatever Operation Crucible had been, it had swallowed its architects whole. This wasn't a war of armies anymore. It was the aftermath, a world left to pick through the wreckage of its own making. Hope. What does that word even mean now? It's not the naive optimism of the before time. Not the belief that everything will be okay, that some hidden power will come and fix it. It's something far more fragile, far more precious. It's the glint of sunlight on a puddler after the rain, reflecting a piece of unbroken sky. It's finding a single, forgotten can of peaches, still edible, in an abandoned pantry. It's the quiet determination to light a fire another night, to find enough calories to keep the body moving. It's the faint, phantom thought that perhaps, just perhaps, someone is listening to this broadcast. It's a desperate, almost animalistic clinging to the idea that existence in itself has meaning, that my voice cast into this echoing void isn't entirely wasted. I heard a story, relayed through a dying signal that barely held for a minute before dissolving into static, of a group in what used to be a farming community, about 60 miles from here. They had managed to salvage some old agricultural equipment, even got a few acres planted with hardy, drought-resistant crops. It was a beacon of fragile hope. But then a desperate wave of refugees, hundreds strong, fleeing a more ravaged city to the west, descended on them, not with malice, not with violence, but with overwhelming hunger. The community was simply overrun, not with a fight, but with a silent, consuming desperation. Their crops, their meager stores, their very means of survival, simply vanished under the hungry hands of hundreds. It was a tragedy of necessity, a horrifying illustration of how fragile these new pockets of life truly are, how easily they can be extinguished by the sheer, unyielding pressure of survival. Another story, closer to home. A small group, about 8 of them, had fortified a small office building downtown just a mile or so from here. I saw smoke from their chimney, a few flickering lights in their upper windows at night. They seemed organized, disciplined. They had figured out how to tap into a working well in the basement, providing relatively clean water. They had even set up a crude alarm system. But then, a few weeks ago, I noticed the silence. No more smoke, no more lights. I ventured close, careful, and saw nothing. Just a broken window on the ground floor, a door ajar, swinging on a rusty hinge in the wind. No bodies, no signs of a struggle, just an eerie, absolute emptiness. It made the hair on my arms stand up. What happened? Did they move? Did they succumb to something unseen, some silent predator or disease? The unknown is often far more terrifying than the visible threat. because your mind fills in the blanks with every possible horror. The dread isn't a sudden shock anymore. It's a constant, low thrum beneath the surface of everything. The unsettling silence of a world without machines. The haunting beauty of nature's relentless advance, indifferent to our suffering. The invisible dangers in the water and soil, silently eroding what health we have left. The fading memory of how things used to be, of music and laughter and simple, comforting conversation. It's the chilling realization that the old world is truly gone, and this harsh, quiet, perilous existence is the new normal. And we are all, each of us, just trying to navigate this shifting, unforgiving landscape. To find a foothold, to find a reason to keep going, to avoid becoming just another silent footnote in the story of collapse. A long, drawn-out moment of static, the generator perhaps sputtering slightly, before Arthur Vance speaks again, his voice now a little softer, a little more reflective, as if speaking to himself as much as to anyone. This is Arthur Vance from WZR, still here, still speaking into the vast indifferent air, waiting for the sun to rise again, and for whatever the new day brings. Over and out. WZR, this is Arthur Vance, still here, still speaking, to whom I can no longer truly know, but I speak anyway. The calendar, if I bothered to keep one, would tell me it's been more than a year. The cycle of seasons has completed itself, twice over since that fateful October Tuesday, since the world went silent. And the war, the World War III outbreak, it didn't end with a bang or a whimper or a signed treaty on some hallowed ground. There was no decisive victory, no public surrender, no triumphant march through liberated streets, no. This war simply burned itself out. The great nations, the superpowers that bristled with arsenals and boasted of impenetrable defenses, their economies linked by unseen digital threads, they consumed themselves. The very infrastructure they relied upon to project power was methodically dismantled. Cyber attack by cyber attack, the global communication backbone was severed. Then, targeted kinetic strikes, not to annihilate but to starve. Fuel refineries went dark. Major ports stood idle. Without communication, without fuel to move their machines, without the logistics to feed and supply their soldiers, the grand armies dissolved. They didn't surrender. They just fragmented, withered. Their strength bled out in 1,000 isolated, unseen skirmishes. The global conflict collapsed into regional, then localized struggles for survival. 1,000,000 tiny, brutal wars for water, for food, for a patch of ground that could sustain life. The concept of nations is largely meaningless now. We are a collection of isolated pockets, struggling, dying, living on a scarred planet. This is the new equilibrium, a harsh, unforgiving existence. Humanity now lives largely pre-industrial lives, pushed back centuries in a matter of months. The few communities that persist do so through sheer grinding effort, cultivating small, defensible plots of land, often with heirloom seeds from before, scavenging for every remnant of the past, a tool, a battery, a fragment of cloth, relying on brute strength and ancient ingenuity, skills we thought we'd outgrown. Clean water remains a constant battle, meticulously filtered through layers of charcoal and sand, boiled over precious wood fires, each drop a victory. Disease, though perhaps less rampant than the first brutal year, is still a silent hunter. A simple fever can sweep through a camp, claiming lives without mercy, for there are no hospitals, no clinics, no medicines. The lingering environmental problems from the collapse, the contaminated rivers, the pockets of toxic soil from neglected industrial sites, the silent, pervasive threat of unchecked chemical waste, they are the invisible enemies, working their slow, insidious havoc on our already fragile health, a testament to our profound carelessness. The society we knew is utterly gone. It fractured not along national lines, not along political ideologies, but along the raw, brutal lines of resource and strength. The weak perished quickly, swept away by hunger, by disease, by the unforgiving cold, by the sudden, brutal violence of the desperate. The strong, those capable of brutality, of taking what they needed, thrived for a time. But even their dominance is fleeting, constantly challenged, constantly under threat from leaner, hungrier groups. The old rules, the social contracts, the very fabric of civility, they vanished like smoke in a gale. The behavior is primal: fear, suspicion, aggression. Altruism is a rare, precious bloom in this scorched landscape, a momentary defiance against the overwhelming darkness. People behave like cornered animals, lashing out, trusting no one, seeing every other human as either a threat or a resource to be exploited, or a burden to be discarded. It's a chilling reminder of how thin the veneer of civilization, how quickly it peeled away, revealing the raw, beating heart of our primal selves. And my personal conflicts, Lily, Sarah, they haven't been resolved. The agonizing not knowing, the hope that kept me broadcasting even when the power was sputtering, has slowly, painfully given way to a quiet, weary acceptance. The roads north were impassable. The journey would have been a death sentence in the chaos of that first month. In the deepest parts of my soul, I know they didn't make it. The hope, the fierce, desperate hope that kept me breathing through the darkest nights, has attenuated. It's not a peaceful acceptance, no. It's a profound, soul-deep grief that has become a permanent part of me. A scar, internal and invisible, a constant ache in my chest. But it has also, strangely, reframed my purpose. This broadcast, this voice to the desolate air, has become my legacy, my defiance against oblivion. I am the chronicler of the fallen world, the last voice of what was. I speak for the lost, for the forgotten, for those who succumbed silently to the cold, to hunger, to the sudden brutal violence. My purpose now is not to find them, for they are beyond finding. My purpose is to ensure that their lives, the lives of millions, were not simply erased without a trace. To bear witness, to tell the story of how it all fell apart and how in its ruin new brutal forms of life emerged. To keep a flicker of memory alive, of a time when the lights worked and the world hummed with life. I often look out from the broken windows of the station, from these upper floors. The city stands before me, a haunting monument to what we once were. The once bustling streets now echo with the rustle of dry leaves, the distant cry of a coyote. The skyscrapers, once symbols of human aspiration, are now decaying teeth in a grim smile against the sky, their glass eyes reflecting an indifferent sun, mirroring the silent, empty streets below. It's a landscape of profound, unsettling beauty, a testament to life's persistence, even as it mocks the arrogance of humanity. The silence is no longer eerie, it's simply the new sound of the world, a deep, pervasive quiet that swallows all but the most insistent sounds. I have no answers for how this will end, because it hasn't ended. This isn't a story with a neat conclusion, a final chapter tied up with a bow. It's an ongoing struggle, a new chapter in humanity's existence, carved out of ruin and ash, day by agonizing day. My voice will eventually fade. This temperamental generator will one day cease for good. This station will fall silent forever. But until that moment, I will speak. I will keep the memory alive. I will testify. For Lily, for Sarah, for everyone. Arthur takes a deep, shuddering breath, the sound magnified by the microphone, a raw, exposed sound of profound weariness and resilience. This from WZR, the last signal, the fading echo. If you hear this, know that you are not alone, and know that the fight continues, not for victory, not for peace, not for a return to what was, but simply to be, to remember, to breathe, to exist in the vast, unforgiving silence. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being there. A long, lingering moment of static. Then the rhythmic chugging of the old diesel generator, which has been a constant, life-affirming companion through this entire broadcast, slowly, irrevocably, sputters. Its sound falters, coughs, and then dies. The faint hum of machinery ceases. The last, faint pulse of power extinguishes. The sound of the wind, rustling through the shattered windows of the abandoned studio, is all that remains. A profound, absolute silence descends, swallowing everything.
Thanks for tuning in. If this narrative pulled you into its depths, consider giving the video a like. Your support is how these stories get told. And if you're ready for more chilling, plausible adventures, make sure you subscribe and join our growing community of explorers. What will we uncover next?